What's the craziest thing you've ever seen at work? I'm fairly certain that a guest came into our zoo with the intent of receiving a golden shower from a lion. For some backstory, if you've never seen those videos of lions pissing on zoo guests, you should look it up. Males can spray urine 10 plus feet through the caging. It stinks worse than you could ever believe. We've had guests puke before when they got sprayed, and is just about impossible to wash off. You don't want to put water on that, trust me. We even have signs up warning people that lions can spray urine. One day, this guy comes in during the morning, and first place he goes is to the lion exhibit. Stands 5 feet from the bars. I caution him about the urine, and he ignores me. Half an hour later, I notice he's still right there, standing almost still. I tell him, I'm not kidding. They spray through the bars sometimes. He nods and backs away a bit. 10 minutes later, I find him closer to the bars than he was before. I think, okay, whatever. Not my fault if you get peed on. I told a couple coworkers about this guy as we went about our morning chores. Another keeper told me, half an hour later, that he got sprayed by a lion. Apparently, he was pretty calm about it and didn't start retching like most people do. Walked straight out of the zoo and back to his car, drenched in lion urine. Story 2. I was a manager at a small casino running a blackjack tournament. I watched a man have a heart attack before my very eyes. It was the end of the round for that table. The man advanced to the next round. As soon as the hand was over and was about to congratulate him, I saw the exact moment that he realized that something was wrong. He grabbed his chest and his lips instantly turned gray. It just so happened that the person sitting directly to his right was respiratory nurse. She realizes immediately what's happening and throws him on the ground and starts CPR. She took full control of the situation like a hero in the movies. It was horrific and awe-inspiring at the same time. The man made a special visit to the casino 2 weeks later to let us know that he was okay. To me, this wasn't crazy because I watched a man almost die. This was crazy because I saw the exact moment that he realized that he was in trouble. I saw the exact moment the nurse's instincts and training kicked in. I'll never forget it. Story 3. There was a fire in the store I work at. Towards the back of the store, we were getting everyone to evacuate, and a woman would not leave. She told me that since where she wanted to shop was not on fire, if she wanted to assume the risk of the bodily injury that I could not stop her. I had to try to balance not losing my crap on her with getting her to leave. Luckily, an older authoritative firefighter had just walked by and heard her, and he turned around and physically picked her up and careened her out as he took her to the exit. It was as if the retail gods finally cut me a break. He did what we all wanted to do. It was absolutely glorious. Story 4. I have 2, and they're both pretty wild. When I was delivering pizza for a really common pizza company in college, and got a standard delivery to a place in my town, not far away, but kind of isolated and off the main road. Pulled up, and outside a big locked gate are 2 big Mexican dudes with what looked like assault rifles. Before I could turn around, one of them walked up to the car and waved at me and told me to wait in the car. Other guy goes over to the gate and opens it. From inside come about a dozen pit bulls who look pretty mad. Then another big Mexican guy comes out to the car to get the pizza. He hands me a $100 bill for a $15 pizza. I didn't have change. He says to get the bill changed and come back, and in the meantime, he's hold on to re-pizza. One of the guards took a picture of my license plate car. I went down to the bank nearby, and they made change really quickly. I headed back. He told me I was slow and late getting back. I gave him his change, and then he stiffed me on the tip. Needless to say, we put a blacklist on this phone number and address, and nobody was allowed to take deliveries to them again. Fast forward a few years, got posted to teach English in Japan for the J program. Ended up in Yamanashi Prefecture near Tokyo. One day, pretty early on in my first year, was asked to host a couple of experienced English teachers for an overnight English camp we were having for our advanced English class. I agreed. The students ended up staying at some educational center for the weekend, but me and these 2 other teachers ended up at an onsen hotel nearby in a really nice room. I'm 22 at the time, and the other teachers are in their 40s, so we decide to go have a drink at the hotel lobby bar in the evening. We get downstairs, and there are a ton of people milling about in their yukata, robes. All are men. They're smoking and talking, joking around, etc. They don't really pay us any mind as we walk into the bar. As soon as we set foot in the bar, we knew we'd messed up. The doors close behind us, and the entire bar is packed with yakuza, all in robes showing their tattoos. They're all drinking like crazy, singing karaoke, etc. There are also about 15 escorts who are in the same uniform. Many are on the verge of being nude as well. We turn to leave without saying a word, but the guys at the door won't let us and point over to a booth where a couple of older guys and one really older guy are drinking with a couple of girls. They're waving for us to come over. We politely oblige, and they tell us to sit down and then order us beers. I'm the only one of us 3 who could speak decent enough Japanese, or at least the other guys were playing it like they didn't know any, so I kind of turn into the interpreter for the night. They keep us there for hours. They wanted to know about England and soccer and American football rules. They ask all kinds of stuff about which we like better, American girls or Japanese girls. They offer us a round with the girls they've got there. We are freaking the hell out and keep trying to leave. One of the guys grabs me by the balls and asks how big I'm downstairs. I laugh it off and try to get out of there. Right after they made us sing some show tunes, they all up and leave. On their way out, they invite us to come along and explain what all of this is. We'd apparently stumbled into a Yakuza Japan tour of various hot springs that they are all on vacation together for. They just happened to be staying the same night at the same place as us, but would move on to a different city next day. All just drinking and savoring the local entertainment. They invite us along. We politely decline. One of the guys gives me his card on the way out and says, if I ever have any trouble, to give him a call and he'll help me out. When all was said and done, we went up to settle our tab, fearing the damage we'd done to our wallets, hoping we hadn't got billed for the escorts. They paid for all of our drinks and we didn't owe a dime. In the end, me and the other two teachers became friends. Haha. They decided not to hold the English teachers overnight after that, though afraid of a repeat. Story 5. I was working at a car dealership and was standing outside with my friends drinking coffee on a Sunday morning. All of a sudden, we heard the sound like thunder and looked up to see an old Pontiac flipping end over end into the lot. It came crashing into a row of Yukons we had up on racks and knocked them over like dominoes. Funny thing is that the guy driving the car was drunk as hell and climbed out of the wreckage without so much as a scratch. Story 6. Worked night shift years back, and as I came out to smoke a cigarette, I found my truck being vandalized. Guy was under it punching a hole in my fuel tank to steal gas for his truck. What's worse is, he did this for a whopping $10-15 worth of gas as I was almost on E. I walked towards my vehicle to investigate, and as I was halfway to it, I noticed hurried movement and him getting out from under it and throwing something into the bed of whose truck. At this point, I was running at full speed towards him to try and stop him, and he hopped in his truck and punched it. He got a full truck length away from my vehicle when I proceeded to jump into the bed of his truck. The POS gangbanger Cholo Mfer then proceeded to try and hit me by speeding through the area, going at least twice the speed limit and drifting every turn, trying to throw me out of the bed. Meanwhile, I was holding on for dear life when all of a sudden I was covered in gasoline. My gasoline. I feel I must mention my lit cigarette from the beginning of this story is still hanging out of my mouth. At this point, I piece it all together and realize this git stole my gas. I'll be damned if Ducker's getting away with my gas, so I threw what was left in the red canister out of the bed first chance I got. He proceeds then to continue to try and kill me some more. He punched it and flew across traffic, almost getting hit by multiple cars, then went into a neighborhood and kept speeding while drifting corners. At this point, I am still holding on for dear life with one hand while on the phone with 911 police with my other, and I'm telling them the street signs as they fly past me. The cops are closing in when he drifts a blind corner in this neighborhood and slams headfirst into the front of a parked car while going 35-45 miles per hour. His truck stalled out, and he had pushed the parked car a few cars GTHS from where it had been parked and smashed both vehicle front ends. I then took this opportunity to jump out of the bed as I didn't want to be on a death ride with this maniac any longer. I then realized that he is trying to get his truck engine to turn over so he can get away. I go to rush his window so I can knock him the duck out. I'm a big, strong guy, and he is a small, framed, skinny Hispanic male. Wouldn't have been hard to do. But unfortunately, his engine turned over right as I got to his door to sock him, and he punched it and took off. It was at this point that I experienced my one and only personal encounter with a convenient cop, obviously patrolling the area per my ongoing phone call with the 911 operator. He pulled up to the street corner one street down literally less than a minute after the ass duck took off. I told him I was okay, and gave him a description of the guy and the vehicle, at which point he took off in pursuit. Another squad car rolled up a minute later, sent by the 911 operator to the cross streets I had given, gave him some more info, and he took me back to my work. Fire dept. Showed up to take care of the gasoline that had spilt from my fuel tank. I also gave my statement to a few cops still soaked in gasoline, while sparking up yet another cigarette. Real smart, I know, due to the stress of it all. 20 minutes later, they caught the git. He fled to his apartment directly across the street from my work. He was part of a Mexican gang, had a prior record, and had burglary tools on him when caught. They took me over to ID him, and it was him all right. He got multiple felonies, the big one being reckless endangerment, as well as charges for destruction of private property in excess of a certain amount, the hit and run of the parked vehicle, the burglary tools, and some other crap. Unfortunately, the got off super light with reduced charges due to a BS plea bargain. He had to pay restitution for damages he had caused to my personal property, which I did actually get some of, but not all of. Last year, I found out that the state-appointed defense attorney that had to take the guy's case, actually a knew the git was guilty and didn't like him, but obviously had to do his job and defend the E&B. Turns out it's a small world because he had a daughter in my mother's classroom. My mother is a grade school teacher, and after she told him about the incident, IDK how it came up in convo, he then proceeded to tell her about how he remembered the case and had to defend the guy. Story 7. I'm a bartender and work a fair amount of weddings. The wedding party was ducked up before the ceremony, and it only got worse during cocktail hour and the reception. Sometime after dinner, we heard voices raised. Shouting and cussing commenced. 2 bridesmaids were having a spat, right in front of all the guests, including the bride and groom. Unfortunately, they were bickering in front of the wedding cake. So when reason flew out the window and good sense was making shots, they began pushing each other, which escalated to hair pulling and blows. Obviously, people began trying to break it up. Unfortunately, in the middle of the scuffle, one of the bridesmaids was pushed forcefully into the cake table. She fell over these 5 stories perfectly decorated cake, demolished it. Never seen something so terrible and yet hilarious at an event. Story 8. I broke up with my ex-girlfriend. We also worked at the same place, which is a terrible idea. I was young and dumb. She was young and a little crazy. She was no crazier than I was. We were both young and dumb. Those things seem to go together. I did not mean to imply I was any better. I certainly was not. Young people may not understand it at the moment. Older people will. Apologies if anyone is still reading. I did not mean to mislead. We also lived together in a 2-bedroom apartment. We had planned on getting a roommate to share the rent, but all this happened before we found a roommate. Luckily for that person. Anyway, she cheated on me, repeatedly, in our spare bedroom. I caught her for the 3rd time and get sex on the door again. I suggested loudly, I admit, that we had some things to discuss and consider in terms of our future. She finished with him and he exited. No problems there. I really was never into violence or even mental or verbal confrontation. The next Monday, she comes into work and is an absolute demon. She races up and down the halls shouting at saleswomen, other female associates, the receptionists, and is accusing them all of sleeping with me. None of that was true. All of these women were in long relationships or just friends. There was literally no reason she should think about these things. Finally, the office manager calls the cops and has her arrested. A couple days later, she shows up at the apartment to collect her things. She has her new boyfriend with her, and they are just about finished getting all her stuff out of the apartment. She comes up to get the last box. She says, "He's waiting in the car." "Cool," I say. "Hope it works out." "Anything else I can do for you?" she responds. "Anything at all?" And the madness in her eyes is deep, very deep. So I respond like anyone would. "I could use a BJ." She drops to her knees in front of my couch and does it. Were I older, as I am now, I would have been terrified about what teeth can do to sensitive flesh. But, as I said, I was young and dumb. She finishes, swallows, collects her final box, and heads down to the parking lot, where she envelops this unknowing guy in a full-blown French kiss. I never saw or heard from her again. It remains in the top 15 or so bizarre things I have ever been involved in. I don't know what either of us was thinking. I guess hormones can really get crazy. Story 9. Work at a beer distributor. Had a guy come. He was married to Mary and her sisters, but they're all Korean. At this point, I think, don't care if this dude isn't drunk, he's still not getting beer today. So he grabs the beer from the counter without paying and starts to walk out. "Excuse me, you can't take that." "But I can." "Yeah, not happening, man." He proceeds to tell everybody in the store they are all going to hell because they won't buy him his beer. Now at this point, I expected him to get on his bike and ride home. It turns out it wasn't his bike. God gets in his car, almost runs over 2 customers in the parking lot, and tries to back over one of our employees who's coming inside, so I call the cops. "Okay, well, if he comes back, call us again." PM, he comes back. Tell we are all mother duckers. As soon as I saw his car pull into the parking lot, had the police department on speed dial, on the phone with them before he got in the store. "All right, we'll be over." They didn't. Nobody came over, so I get outside. I'm sick of this dude showing up, so I try getting on his level, and he stares me dead in the eyes. "You mother ducker," gets in his truck, peels out, and again, almost runs someone over. And okay, so I'm thinking, okay, he's got to be done now. 8:30 p.m. It's dark outside. It's busy inside. Guess whose headlights come bouncing in the parking lot? This time he comes to the front door with his hand behind his back, and he's just staring at me. I told one of our guys to call the cops, and he's just standing there with his hand behind his back. Everyone in the store notices this guy with his hand behind his back. So, cue Western soundtrack. Everyone who is carrying a gun goes for their gun. I'm about to have a shootout in the store. I also forgot to mention, owners made me a manager 2 days prior to this, and this was my first night as a manager in charge. Crazy dude. Keeps telling me to come outside. Duck that noise. So one of our dumber employees goes, "Yeah, sure," and he goes outside. I told the guy inside to tell the cops they need to get here right now. I go outside to try to get our guy back inside. I went outside and the dude has blood all over his face and a cut on his forehead. Great. He keeps trying to get fellow employee to go talk to him in the corner of the parking lot. Fellow employee tries to walk over with him. Nope, 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 nope. If you need to say something to him right here in the light, it is fine. Customer starts walking into the store, seeing the situation, and this was very kind of him. Decides to move his truck behind his truck so he can't get out. Parks him in, calls the cops, then comes over to us and whispers to me, "I'm pretty sure he has a gun in his pants." Yep, stuff is on sale all week. I'll see you inside. Ask Kyle if those guys ever called about coming in to pick their stuff up. Felt like James Bond with all the code language. But I didn't feel like James Bond. I was terrified I was going to get shot, that this dude was going to hit me and someone else, or someone else was just going to shoot him. We talked a bit more, told him we'd get him his beer. We just needed him to stay a little longer. He got spooked, got in his truck, which is parked in, decided to drive over the bank and almost caused an accident. Police finally showed up 20 minutes after he left, gave them all the info we had. Never heard anything again. Once he left, I go back inside and most of the customers are still there. Each one tells me, "Don't worry." As soon as I saw him, I turned the safety off. Like 20 dudes. All said the same thing. And then this little old guy comes through and says, "Me too." Gets his 30 PK and leaves. We closed up shop. I went home and just did the 1,000-yard stare while I sat on the floor for about 20 minutes. Story 10, I got 2. Little bit of background. I worked at a sandwich place which made their own bread, and I was getting in early because I like to do a little longer rise. Felt the bread came out better that way. Our location had 2 floors that had to both be accessed from the outside. The downstairs had the washing sink, the walk-in, and storage, where the top floor contained the shop, the proofer, and the oven. We were also located on the downtown mall and had heavy foot traffic. First, I was on vacation for Thanksgiving and had a week off. My first shift after my break was an opener, so I arrived at 6:45 to start the process. I first turned things on upstairs and briefly checked the prep list to see what I'm in store for this morning. It wasn't long before I headed downstairs to grab the frozen dough to begin the thawing process. I put my key in the door to the basement and push. I try and push the door, but it is heavy and slams shut in my face. This door is not normally hard to open. I pushed again harder and got it open further, but again it came back and shut in my face. There has to be something blocking the door. So I push again, but this time hold it open far enough to stick my head through. There on the other side of the door was my manager lying on the ground. This is not the weirdest thing in the world for me because my manager, Phil, pseudonym, was staying with someone who would kick him out randomly, not let him have basic rights, like use the house's washer dryer. Anyways, he would sleep at work sometimes, but usually gone way before work. "Phil!" Nothing. I try again. This time it will be a little louder. "Phil!" His eyes shot open and looked at me. "Hey man, look, I got to open. You need to get up. I'll be back in 10. I proceed to shut the door and go back upstairs to count the drawer. After a while, I come back down and the door still won't open. I knock and yell, "Phil, I gotta get in," but nothing returned my call. Phil. I push the door open again to the point where I can stick my head through, and there, Phil is lying in front of the door. I did forget to mention that his head was against the door, and when I pushed it open, it pushed into his head. At this point, I start to get worried. I end up forcing the door open just barely enough so I can slip in, and am standing over Phil looking down at him. His eyes were closed, but when I yelled his name, his eyes would open and look at me, so I knew he was conscious, but knew something was wrong. I ended up calling the owner, who happened to be on his way over anyways, to drop off a shipment of things he had gotten from the store, and we called an ambulance. Turns out, he had drunk way too much the night before, to the point where he got pneumonia and had to spend the next 3 weeks in the hospital. Since he was in the hospital, I got promoted to manager. Second is a shorter and maybe sweeter. Working up top, we were able to people watch quite a bit due to the amount of foot traffic at the mall. One time, a naked man walked around for about 30 minutes. During this time, he did a numerous amount of odd things, from standing next to and watching a couple eat their food to trying to pull a tree down. He ended up having the cops called on him and was found a block down in an alley wrapped in a blanket. Story 11. So I never normally post on Reddit, but this was too much to pass up. I work in a glorified call center, and one day we were told that a trial shift was coming. So far, so good. About an hour before the trial, as she will henceforth be known, all of our phones went down. They came back on intermittently, so we were still having calls coming through. At one point, an agent, Jay, turns around to our manager and says, "Hey, do you have a trial coming in today? Because I think she's drunk." So we play it off because we're stressed out about the phones not working and forget about it for half an hour. Just to set the scene, my department is in a small annex off the main office, as we're always in the phone. We need to keep the noise down. So we get a knock on the door, and one of our big office colleagues is stood there, looking absolutely terrified. She pauses for a minute, steps inside, closes the door, and says, "Your trial shift has just arrived." She's off her face, at which point, we all turn around and look at each other. We don't really have time to think because suddenly, this very tall, very skinny woman sidles into the office like a giant drunk spider. She's wearing the same clothes she wore to the interview yesterday. Her eyes are the size of the moon. Her tights are completely torn, and her leg is bleeding. She is absolutely crap-faced. Me and the other 3 girls in the office spring to attention. I start muttering about getting water. Another girl goes to grab the first aid box. My friend Jay from earlier just stands up and walks out. We meet in the kitchen and decide we'll have to go back into the room because our manager hasn't come out. So we come back in and very drunk trial shift girls ling around in a swivel chair. Now is probably the time to mention, we don't sit in a traditional office layout. We are in a U shape around the outside of the room. We all sit back down and drunk girls in the middle of the U. We all have our backs to her and the phones still aren't working. The trial starts burbling about how she doesn't need to actually learn our job because she already knows it. My manager, who was later fired, is doing to nothing to contain the situation. We start saying, look, maybe you should go home. Come back tomorrow. Tomorrow is a new day, etc. And she loses it. Starts screaming at all of us, waving her arms around. And we are all absolutely terrified because we can't move away from our desks. My manager finally decides to stand up and do something. She gets the trial's attention and gently suggests that she might go home. The trial stands up and starts threatening my manager. All the while, we are all still sat at our desks, not able to move. Out of the corner of my eye, I see my friend S inching her hand towards a fruit knife she'd left on her desk. Still not sure whether she was grabbing it to get it out of the way or as a weapon of self-defense. It gets better, or ever so worse, from here. The trial is now shouting how she deserves a job because she came all the way to our office and hurt her legs. Remember the ripped tights. My manager tells her to leave. She sits down on the swivel chair and starts taking her tights off in the middle of our tiny office. When her tights are around her ankles and her legs are akimbo, the director of the entire company walks in and says, "What on earth is going on here?" At which point, the trial swivels around, flashes him and screeches, "Who the duck are you?" My director replies very smoothly, "I own this company. Who the duck are you?" Drunk girl then goes, "You need to leave," to the big boss. At which point he turns around to Wall and very calmly says, "I'm giving you 10 seconds to put your tights on, get you bag, and leave. Otherwise, I'm calling the police." So drunk girl does as she's told, is escorted to the door, and very promptly falls down the stairs. This all happened at 2 in the afternoon in an office. I have never seen anything like it. Story 12. I worked at a car wash. They would go into the tunnel, then come out and pull into a 3-2 car bay where we'd do a full-service interior clean while customers waited inside with Wi-Fi, coffee, TV, etc. One day was particularly busy and the bay was full, so we had a couple cars waiting in line to get in. There was one guy, we'll call Tom, probably early 40s, short, Asian, recently hired. He apparently forgot to get the stop button in the tunnel, so a car was getting pushed out and hit the empty parked customer car that was in front of it. He got the customer out. I'd K what he said, but they went inside to talk to the manager. Then he tried to fix things by pulling the cars up, but ended up hitting 2 other cars with a customer car, then backing that car into the bushes and wall in the back. He just got out and stormed off while all hell broke loose, with a handful of customers' cars being crashed and everything backed up. It was not pretty. Story 13. Warning, this is not a funny story. I worked in a hospital as a phlebotomist. My coworker was having troubles with her husband. He had returned from serving in the military with severe depression and paranoia. He tried to hurt her and told her he wanted to hurt their kids. She took herself and kids to her parents' house and reported him to the police. They took his guns and held them for 24 hours. Everyone at work was informed that he was not allowed on the hospital grounds. He came into the hospital a couple hours after his guns were given back to him and hit and lost her and then himself. Story 14. One of our machines broke on my shift. Roughly 10 KLBs of metal went crashing 10 feet down, landing about 6 feet away from the nearest employee. I was shift lead at the time and was counting heads, making sure nobody got crushed. My heart still races at the thought of that. All safety protocol was being practiced. It was literally just a freak accident. Thankfully, nobody got hurt, just shooken up a little bit. Story 15. Kinda happened over the span of some weeks or so. One of the managers at my work, not my department, started dating this lady. Lady turned out to be not so good for him because she had an addiction IOIRC and she was using him for money. Long story short, she bled him dry and left him right after. He ended up homeless. He then bought a van off a buddy for cheap and started living behind our building. He had an outlet running under the loading door and everything. That lasted for a couple weeks, but then upper management found out and the guy got canned. I miss that dude. Hope you're doing well, Tom. Story 16. In college, I was a black car service driver as well as being in the National Guard. As a driver, my job was to ensure these guests, NFL players, actors, millionaires, wedding guests, politicians, etc., enjoy their 2-minute, 6-hour ride with me. That means I'd have fresh hot coffee in the back, or their favorite pizza for the ride, favorite music and air temperature according to their assistants. It was a fun gig and I got to meet famous people. Wedding parties were the worst. One day, I'm in between runs and make a stop at a 7-Eleven to grab items for my next ride. Someone is upset inside the store, so I jump in my car and relax to get out of there. Next thing I know, the dude is in the small parking lot screaming at the 7-Eleven. Two employees are holding the double doors shut. Belligerent dude pulls a knife and says he's going to stab them. Customers are lined up inside the windows, and I appear to be the only person on the outside, but in my car, eating and watching the drama. Guy makes several attempts to enter the store, but no luck. All of a sudden, the doors swing open. A tall cashier had gotten a running start and flew out with some nunchucks. Guy with knife, upon seeing the doors swing open and a dude at full gallop falls over. He gets around the corner, tripping, and the cashier starts going in on him. The guy ends up stabbing the cashier several times, but nothing life-threatening. I had gotten out of the car by then and was witnessing everything. I later had to testify in court. My favorite job was driving Icky Woods to film this commercial. Oh, and court went long, and the prosecutor didn't want to let me leave to add coins to my on-street parking spot. I was about to testify. I later go outside and had received a parking ticket. Great day. Story 17. Walmart, ex-employee here, settle in. I have a few. He has a gun in a holster, Texas. So naturally he's hanging out in sporting goods. Goes to pull his wallet out as I'm finishing getting him his fishing license, and I hear a couple really loud bangs directly in front of me. Dude accidentally blew his foot to shreds because he didn't have the safety on. Next up is when I was moving to AP, asset protection, where a fragile-looking old lady is loading cart after cart of those super expensive Dyson vacuum. She just walked out the door with at least 5 of them. We didn't find out the whole weekend, but we found it on the screens in the back that the camera caught. So bizarre. Someone was fired for not spider wrapping them, I believe. I got a lot more, but I'll end with the time a small woman nearly paralyzed a dude with like a judo flip trip thing on Black Friday for getting the last Spider-Man PlayStation. He was alright, minor back injury and concussion, and got his PlayStation. Story 18. 20 used needles in the fitting rooms, and people screeching like monkeys while circling me. I used to work retail for a mass clothing company in a semi-sketchy mall during my sophomore year in college. I've dealt with some seriously messed up people. To give background to how our store worked, each employee were placed in zones and then switched off of them every hour. Needles. I was zoned in the men's fitting room. This well-mannered and well-spoken man had a handful of suit pants he wanted to try on. He seemed all right and talked about how he used to be in the army and needed new suit pants for his new job. 30 minutes later, I didn't see him and I'm switched off to the kids department. 10 minutes later, I hear an adult man just screaming, "They're watching!" People screaming odd things in and out of our store was incredibly common, so at first I didn't look up. This was followed by my other female coworker screaming out my name from the fitting room. I dashed in there, and she was damn near vomiting and pointing to the fitting room. I pulled back the curtain and saw the army dude's pants he was wearing, and the pants he wanted to try on, covered in at least 15 or 20 crusty, bloody, months-old used needles and 2 newer-looking ones. I'm not squeamish, but the smell hit me and was so disgusting. Dude must have kept all of his old needles trying to squeeze out some leftover substances from previous uses. This was a clear biohazard, communicated the code word for fluids, and we shut down the top floor for cleaning. Of course, the manager, who was a real bee, demanded that we stay upstairs to clean the rest of the store. I was like, yeah, no duck you, not going up there. Army dude was arrested without pants in garage lot high as a kite, screeching people. Okay, so apparently one of the designers for the company's kids department thought it was a great idea to photograph the one model they had in a sweatshirt that said in large print "Little Monkey" on it. This caused a short national uproar of anger and accusations on the company. While it's a design mishap, it is not the retail workers' fault. The thing is, I didn't know about it because I was out of state on vacation when the new sweatshirt was released. The next day I came in not aware of the blow-up. I was in the men's department, organizing sunglasses alone. All of a sudden, this large group of people come into the store, and I greet them. "Hi, how are you? Is there anything I can do for you?" They all stare at me with crazy wide eyes and start making extremely loud monkey-like noises, and then circle me, and the sunglasses rack for 2 minutes screeching at me, and, "Is this what you want?" I was terrified because I had no clue why they were so angry and circling me like sharks while making monkey noises. All I could do was clutch onto the sunglasses rack and beg them to forgive me, and I was just trying to do my job. They bolted when my manager shooed them away, and I was like, "What the duck?" She explained the sweatshirt fiasco to me, and I was instructed to go to the kids department to remove anything that said or had a monkey on it. I know this seems tame, but it shook me up. Story 19. First night shift I ever did at my job started off wild. Okay, so I work in a supermarket and normally work day shifts. This was when I was first dating my fiance and he was doing a week of night shifts. I took this as an opportunity to get to know him better and volunteered to work a night shift. We work at the same place. So up until about 11:30 p.m., it's pretty dead. Then I served this group of people who were about the same age as me. They were buying alcohol. Nothing seemed off. They seemed merry, but not like clearly intoxicated. So I serve them and they sit on the bench next to my checkout for a while. Cue police coming up to them, one male and one female officer, and asking if they had been involved in a vandalism incident in the town center nearby, as one of them matched a description given. The man being questioned started to get a bit agitated and raised his voice. Nothing too serious yet. It was pretty clear that he was obviously the man they were looking for, as he immediately became defensive and loud. The officer warned him to calm down, or he would be arrested. Meanwhile, what I can assume was his girlfriend, who was next to him, was becoming increasingly more and more aggressive, screaming, "He ain't done nothing." Suddenly, she jumps up and goes to attack the female officer. Bad move, the female officer proceeds to deliver a swift kick to the lady garden, but this doesn't stop the girlfriend. She tries to attack the officer again. Now a fight is broken out between the original dude being questioned and the male officer who is calling for backup. The other people that are with them are trying to attack the officers, and now my manager has joined in the fray, trying to help the police. He has one girl pinned up against the wall, keeping her off of the female officer who, while this fight has broken out, has given the girl who attacked her a hearty dose of pepper spray. While all this is happening, I'm sat on the till, still serving customers as the rest of my colleagues have all gathered round to watch. The rest of the store is almost silent, as everyone just stands there and watches as I'm sat scanning away, checkout beeping, and a huge fight happening literally feet away from me. Pepper spray hurts, even if you're not the one it was directed at. My manager's eyes were pretty puffed up for the rest of the shift, and I couldn't stop my eyes watering. The rest of the shift was rather boring. From 10:10 would work a night shift again. Story 20. The weirdest thing for me, hotel front desk, was an old man, easily in his 70s with his wife and kid, asked me if he could do donuts on our parking lot. No, not the edible kind, I asked. One of my coworkers told me on Christmas Day that one of our elevators was currently off because it had bloody walls. Turns out one of the guests, an already suspicious dude because of the rate he had gotten smashed and beat his girlfriend and the friend they had come with. Dude got arrested, of course. Story 21. A colleague making jelly shots, yes, with alcohol in them, at work during lunch, then putting them in the work fridge to set. I work for the government. I'm Australian, and the employee was a young female who actually made the jelly shots at work. Story 22. I used to work at a budget store in the Netherlands. We had all sorts of crazy-ass customers. But one lady made me almost pee my pants from laughing, while at the same time asking myself if I should call 112, our 911. A woman came into the store. She was screaming and crying into her phone. She looked kind of like she could have been an addict or escort, or both. Both of those are kind of legal in our country. She came up to me at the register, still crying, but she had hung up the phone by now. She looked at me. I asked her if she was okay. She tried to change the subject, I thought, by telling me how much she felt like eating cake right now. I feel like we can all relate to that at some point. Next thing, she looked into her purse, looked up at me with a big smile on her face and said, "Duck, I have a cake in my bag." She paid for her stuff, sat on the floor next to the register, pulled out the cake, and started eating it with her hands. Keep in mind, it was a pretty busy day, so everyone saw her, looked at her with a, she's a mess kind of face, but said nothing. Because I had a strong feeling the person she talked to on the phone was likely her pimp, I just let her sit there and finish the whole cake. We made some small talk when there were no customers I needed to help. My supervisor even brought her a glass of water. This was a few years ago, but I still think of this moment every now and then, and as I got older, I realized that at some point in my life, I was in a sitting on the floor eating cake with my hands kind of state. Even if people are at their breaking point, you still have to show respect and sometimes just let them be. They might need just that, letting them be. Story 23. I was working retail at an office supply store when one day two guys walked in and they seemed really nervous. They were just walking around the store. Assistant manager came by and told me to just keep an eye on them. About 5 minutes later, another guy came in and it was obvious he was looking for something. He found the two guys and started yelling at them. I think one of the duo had slept with the other guy's sister. The shouting guy grabbed a folding chair and started swinging it at them and chased them for a bit. Guys eventually ran out, and the chair-wielding guy was subdued by the assistant manager. Same chain, different location. An elderly guy walked around our store with a torn colostomy bag, leaked all over the store. My buddy pulled the short straw and had to clean it up. Story 24. I worked in a major electronics store. That shall remain nameless, but you can probably guess. As a second job for about 2 years, the counter for my debt was right at the end of the hallway that went to both restrooms. I'm a woman and was the only woman in my depth. One by one, women were coming out of the ladies' room and whispering to me that the ladies' room needed some attention. I ignored them for a bit and did the typical not my job thing in my head. After about 20 women walked by, not an exaggeration as it was a weekend and this store was very close to the mall, and said the same thing, I decided to take a look. It looked like a crime scene. There was urine, mixed with feces, mixed with diarrhea, mixed with blood all over the floor. One of the stalls, out of only 4, was overflowing with much of the same in toilet paper. The same stall was against the wall, and there was fecal matter on the walls. The walls! The 2 sinks had all kinds of stuff in them. The drains in the floor, which were supposed to help in case of a toilet overflowing, got backed up because of the solid waste. So stuff was starting to pool. All of this I could see from just standing in the doorway. I backed out slowly and radioed to someone that I was guarding the door so no one could come in and that it needed attention immediately. A guy came with a mop and did the best he could. It was horrifying. I heard from some employees that had been in there when the destruction started that it was all caused by one woman who had an accident and cleaned herself in the sink. Story 25. I work in SF, so I got plenty of stories. Worked at a touristy cafe gift shop. One day it was raining and there was a homeless man coming in and making customers uncomfortable and saying weird things. Managers told him to leave and he did only show up a couple hours later. We assume high on something. He was yelling and banging on the windows. For context, the walls of the gift shop were like all glass so we could still see him. He tried stealing money from the donation box and running around screaming. My coworker and I were behind the bar and watching the whole thing unfold. After a few minutes, the manager got him outside and locked the doors. There was only one customer in the store by now who seemed like they were chillin', unaware of the commotion. Anyway, the homeless guy is still yelling and banging on the windows. At this point, I'm sure someone had called police. We thought that would be the extent of it. Nope. Not even 5 minutes after he left, one of the gift shop girls runs over and says to us, "He's literally crapting on the window." Now, we had probably made around 100 and it had been so slow all day. So when she said that, my coworker and I looked at each other for a moment, then hightailed our asses over the counter and ran to see if the horror was real. Yep, he was crapting on the window and pissing all over the place. We got to see the police arrive and the officer detain him. I guess he decided it would be better to cooperate after all. Since we get some weirdos out and about pretty often, we knew the officer who helped out and thanked him by giving him free coffee. Who I feel the worst for is the poor lady who scrapped off his crap from the window. Story 26. I had an experience at the preschool, located within an upscale subdivision that I worked at a few years ago. I managed to fall and twist my knee really badly while on the job. Someone, I think it was a parent picking a child up, called 911, and when they told the dispatcher what happened, something was miscommunicated and they somehow got that the preschool was in a hostage situation. Within minutes, the parking lot was full of cops, fire trucks, and EMS personnel. Apparently, they had tried to call the school before they came, and the supervisor was out of the office and her assistant didn't answer it, so they assumed the worst. Once they made contact with the supervisor, they wanted to come in and check all of the rooms just in case. On top of all of the emergency personnel, a lot of parents had heard something happen at the school and they were parking along the road and curb trying to get inside, but police stopped them because 1, they were still investigating. I was being loaded into an ambulance, which made it all look much worse than it truly was. I heard it took hours for all of the crazy to die down once the police were satisfied that the school was safe and cleared out. We never figured out who called 911 or how the dispatcher got that there was a hostage situation when it was just a fall. When my dad arrived to drive me home, I was in a knee brace, and pick up my kids who were at the preschool, all my son could talk about was the policeman who had passed out some stickers and plastic badges to the kids to calm the kids down. All of them left laughing about the situation. Story 27. When I worked retail in the early 2000s, one of our seasonal employees dropped a TV from ladder height onto a customer's head. It was not a flat screen. Story 28. A picture of the shotgun crapter in the women's bathroom. My department is practically all women. So one day, one of them is talking about the 4th floor in our building and how she walked into the bathroom to open the door to one of the most horrid smells ever. As she walks in, she opens the door to the stall, and there the nightmare is. The picture she showed me made me want to puke instantly. Off green-brown crap everywhere in the stalls. It almost looked like at one point, they slipped in it on the floor. This wasn't like a disgruntled employee doing this to be an ass. This was straight-up shotgun blast crap. Turns out, it had been going on daily for a few weeks. It got so bad that our work placed a sign on the women's door to the bathroom saying, "If you are the individual causing the mess in the women's bathroom, please see a doctor or contact our health services." There was also a picture I was shown from the women's bathroom on our floor where a lady decided at work was the time to shave. There was a legit pile of hair all over the floor. My dad worked at a big department store as a janitor. He always said the women's bathroom was hands down the nastiest. He always would yell about the hoverers. Story 29. I used to work at a gas station in suburban Oregon. Once, super late at night, around 2 in the morning, a huge tour bus pulled into the fueling area. The door opened up, and at least 20 drunk Russian men poured out of the bus and into the gas station. It was rather surreal. They didn't cause any problems, but I was never able to find out who they were or what they were doing on such a large bus so late at night. On a different night, a gang of bikers pulled in to fuel up, and I swear the boss almost killed one of his subordinates for talking back. It was one of the most tense situations I've ever been in. Me and all of the other workers were actually semi-hiding behind the car wash while it went down. Once, a bunch of extremely death metal-looking people came in after a concert to use the bathroom and buy some food. After they left, one of the workers went in to clean the bathroom and found a baggie that had over a dozen pills in it. One other time, a lady pulled into the fueling area with about 10 cop cars and several cop SUVs following her. She refused to open her door, so they broke the window and tased the crap out of her. On a different, otherwise uneventful evening, out of nowhere, a massive convoy of cop cars and cop SUVs started pouring in from every direction all over town and all went down one specific street. We just assumed there was a meth lab bust going down. My favorite night, though, was when some dudes ran out of gas just as they reached the station. They said they didn't have money to buy gas, so I got some for them. In return, they gave me a massive gob of rather high-quality THC oil. I had a good time after getting off work that day. Story 30. I seen a pregnant coworker get hit by a wooden pallet. We worked as order fillers, driving around on electric pallet jacks, picking cases of product to stack on pallets behind the jack. The bays with the product went too deep and were on rollers. Every time a person picked the last item off a pallet, they were supposed to pull the empty pallet out and put it in a return area. She went to pull the empty pallet out, but it was broken or decayed. So as she tried to take it out, the pallet behind the empty one came forward and the empty pallet shattered. She got pinned against her jack and a piece of wood caught her in the side. Of course, the company we worked for treated its workers like crap, so when one of the supervisors came by and saw she wasn't bleeding that much, he actually asked her if she was okay to keep working. If I remember correctly, the supervisor talked her out of going to the hospital. Both instances were a little shocking to witness, honestly. As far as I know, the baby ended up fine, but it really sucks when an evil corporation is your daddy. Story 31. I suppose it's nothing super crazy, but I do remember this day very vividly. I used to work at a Subway restaurant, and it was located in kind of a shady neighborhood. We had this African-American couple walk in one day and kind of linger around the store. The guy was wearing bright green neon pants, and the woman was wearing a light blue top that was clearly too small for her. The man eventually went into the men's restroom and was in there for a good 20-25 minutes. Eventually, he came back out, and he and his girlfriend walked up to us and asked about a sandwich we, at the time, didn't serve anymore. Disappointed, they left the restaurant and then came back a few minutes later and just sat at one of the tables. We tried to politely ask them to leave, but they refused because it was too hot out there, Chief. After a few moments went by, they walked outside, and some cops that frequent our store walked in and came up to the register. They asked me if I had seen two African-American people, one wearing neon green pants and the other wearing a light blue top. I told them they were just here and left about 5 minutes prior to their arrival. My shift was over about 10 minutes after that, and as I walked outside, the place was surrounded by about 3-4 cop cars. My mom was picking me up that day, and she was freaking out. Apparently, the couple had robbed a nearby convenience store and walked over here to try and evade the police. As I was entering my mom's car, the woman yelled out to the police, "Y'all don't know who you're ducking with. I'm the mother ducking queen of this whole neighborhood." Pretty interesting way to end the day. Story 32. Worked as an EMT for a couple years, mainly doing interfacility transfers. My partner and I were told to go post off the highway, so we pulled off and head to the gas station to fill up the truck. As soon as I put the truck in park, an attendant was knocking on my window saying, "I think someone needs your help." Keep in mind, we have old and limited supplies, but had monitors and oxygen. We get out and walk over to the door to see an elderly guy face down on the concrete with an abrasion on his forehead. I check for a pulse. Nothing. PT is agonal breathing, aka very close to dead. My partner runs back to the truck to grab the monitor and O2. I roll over the PT with the help of a couple of bystanders and cut open his shirt to start CPR. I start compressions as my partner's coming back and starts to attach the pads to shock the PT. I'm not even through my first round of CPR when the PT's eyes fly open and he bolts upright, screaming in absolute terror, grabbing my partner and just screaming. 5 seconds later, he passes back out, but all his vitals came back normal. Pulse, BP, breathing rate, all in the green. This happens 3 more times before the medics arrive to transport the patient. By the time they come, the patient is alert and oriented, can tell me everything leading up to the moment he passed out. The PT denied having an internal defibrillator pacemaker, never had any heart issues in his life. I don't know what he saw or experienced, but the look in his eyes and the screaming shook both my partner and I. Story 33. I held a summer job, and I was one of those people at county fairs who try to get you to sign up for a free bathroom remodel estimate. I was terrible at the job, but I tried to be as nice as I could. To preface this, I'm not trying to be degrading to any particular group of people. I'm just trying to tell a story and why it was so crazy to me. So I'm doing my thing, trying to talk to folks walking past me when suddenly this person comes up to me. I have never in my life met a drag queen, but I think they're cool for being who they want to me. But this particular person was interesting to me because they were wearing an ill-fitting blazer skirt combo, as well as really messy makeup. As in, their lipstick was really smeared and the eyeliner was smudged. And they were older, probably mid-50s, with visible stubble and facial hair. I felt some pity for them, as I knew that other people were staring at them, as they were out of place in the lower Chicago neighborhood. They came up to me and started asking me questions, some more personal than others. I don't like giving my personal information to strangers, so I tried to brush it off. They then complimented me on my lipstick. I was wearing bright pink lipstick, and asked me to take a picture of me. Me, being too nice Midwestern, agreed. Then they pulled out an envelope of pictures of them and had me pick one to keep. I picked one, and to this day, it sits in a drawer because I cannot bring myself to throw it out. It's signed The Pretty Girl. I hope they're doing well, but it was such a bizarre life encounter. Story 34. I have several from my old place of work, a small construction company where I was the front desk lady. One, a man who was clearly homeless, going through the rocks in our landscaping, one by one, checking for heft and dimensions, etc. I sent the biggest guy in the building out to ask him what the heck was going on. I thought he was going to use it to break a window or something, and he was just looking for a rock for protection, I guess. We let him continue to peruse through the rocks, and he was on his way. 2, a coworker's baby mama called freaking out that he stole equipment. We investigated and found out he had no stolen equipment. She was just nuts. They were having relationship problems, and she wanted him to lose his job for it. He did lose his job, but for using Met. 3, a guy standing in full view of our entryway, just peeing onto the adjacent building. He shook his banana a little too much too when he was done, violently. 4, an older gentleman came into my office and sheepishly asked me if we had found any keys. He explained that after he got too drunk at the bar across the street, he had spent the night in our bushes but had lost a key. I took his number and told him I'd call him if it was found. Never did find it. 6. Shortly after I left for a less dramatic company, all of the company trucks in the parking lot had their catalytic converters stolen. That was a wild place to work, and I'm really glad I don't have to answer phones anymore. Story 35. A client at a bank who joked about wanting to hit himself while looking like a video game character who had his looks randomized. So, to start with, working at a bank, when the guy walked up to the drive-through window. Already not a great start. He was wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and a hospital gown backwards over both. He had a cowboy hat. We were in New York. A cigarette dangling from his lip, absolutely defying gravity, and gets sex on the window to get our attention. Us. Hi, can we help you? Him. Yeah, if you've got a loaded shotgun, I'd take it right about now. Oh, look. Our colorful weirdo just became a whole bunch of red flags. It's about this time we notice he's got crutches propped up next to the window, along with a few other choice medical items, including a wrist tag and a back brace so old FDR may have used it. We also notice that not only are the braces different heights, they're entirely different makes. He asks if anyone had turned in a phone this morning. We say no, and that was the only normal part of the interaction, and we thought the story would end there, but no. He grabs his crutches, starts crutching away around to the front of our building to the curb to cross the street. Not at the crosswalk, not that weird, but come on, man. A car slows to let this clearly disabled guy cross. So he picks up his crutches, puts them both under one arm, and jogs across 3 lanes of traffic to the other side of the road. I've never been more amazed at the level of strange one person can exhibit. Story 36. Not crazy, but funny to me. I worked in a steel fabrication shop when I was younger. The guy training me was an old family friend and was easily close to 500 lubs on a good day. We were unloading a truck full of I-beams, which typically wasn't our job, but it was a slow day. Normally, I'd be up on the truck rigging up the load and he would overrunning the crane, but I'm guessing on this day he was feeling rather frisky, and he got up there for some reason. We were done with one stack and I was heading over to unhook the chains in a very isolated area that would be hard for me to get to. IDK what he was thinking, but he told me to stay where I was and he would get it. Now there's about a 20-foot gap from the truck to the stack of steel, and it would have been easier for me to get it instead of him coming down off the truck. But before I could say anything, he had grabbed the one loose chain and prepared to swing Tarzan style from the truck to the stack. This is something OSHA would have not been happy with, but I had personally done myself along with other PPL. Not so much something you'd expect a 500-pound man to be seen doing. Instead of swinging over like intended, surprisingly his hands couldn't handle the instant 500-pound load. Go figure. He slid down the chain about 10 t and slammed his body into the stack of steel and proceeded to knock it and the 15 other stacks over like dominoes. We referred to him as the wrecking ball from then on. Story 37. I worked in a clothing store that didn't have a public restroom. The owners told us that under no circumstances were we to take them to the restroom that the employees use. IDKY, but they micromanaged and watched the cameras like crazy, so I wasn't about to break that rule. Well, one night, a woman was pissed because we didn't have a public restroom. And so she walked to the big trash can we had by the back where we were doing some work and literally sat in it, peed, and walked out in front of everyone. Like it was nothing. Story 38. I went to a service call. Upon arrival, I called the customer. She told me her boyfriend just got jumped and they were at the hospital down the street and she will be there in 10 minutes, so I waited. When she finally got home, right off the get-go, you can see she has sores all over her face and has had a long history of substances abuse. No problem. Nothing I have not seen before. So we walk up to her apartment. The moment I walk in, she lived in a bachelor pad and boy was I in for a surprise. There was vanity with a mirror and pictures of her younger self half-dressed as when she used to dance. A plate with a small pile of substances which she claims is medicinal. A small mirror with a little pile of substances. And of course, there was a bunch of toddler toys scattered around the room. As I did my repair, I hear scraping. In my head, I was thinking, no way is she gonna do a rail while I'm here. Sure enough, I hear a huge snorting sound. I turn to see her pacing back and forth, rubbing her nose. Then sure enough, I hear a low moaning sound like a couple going at it. I figured walls were thin, and it was a different apartment. Nope. She's watching adult film on her cell phone. Honestly, thought someone was gonna come from the closet with a camera saying I got punked or something. Story 39. I used to work in a hospital and someone came in who had shot their testicles off. They were actually very calm considering the circumstances. Also, I watched someone run into the ER, announce that they were having a heart attack, and then collapse from said heart attack. Another time when I was working temporarily in long-term care, I went to the ER for some supplies. I knew we had some extra towels hidden somewhere and saw a woman near the trauma rooms looking for the exit. The emergency department was huge, so the exit was at the other end of the ER. Ed, I guess, but whatever. So I offered to take her. As we began walking, I was hit with a gurney coming out of a trauma room. On the gurney was a dead body. The impact of the person with the gurney hitting me caused the sheet over their head to fall off and their arm to come out from under it. So I distracted the woman by pointing out various cool spots within the care unit, trying very hard to distract her from the body that had just hit me. When I got back to where I had been working, someone had asked how the supply run went, and I told them, fine, mostly. Only one casualty, but what are you gonna do? They were slightly concerned. Story 40. Guy found out he was getting fired and ran off and hid somewhere in building. Massive place, so 99% of people didn't know he was being looked for. A few hours later, he turns up at manager's desk throwing tables and fire extinguishers at anyone who had clothing identifying as a supervisor, trying really hard to just wreck a manager, any manager. Big guy from the dock sees this from distance, walks over with purpose of a frickin' movie star, grabs rampaging dude by neck, and in one action lifts him in air and shouts, "Boys, stop!" Slams him into floor and sits on him until police come. Just the total one-sided dominance. You've never seen a large adult able to lift a table overhead, so easily overpowered. Dock guy probably saved a life or at least saved someone a serious injury. Think they gave him like 2K in shares as a thank you. Story 41. I work at an alternative clothing and fetish wear store. We aren't an adult store. It's not shady at all. And 90% of our stock is clothes and accessories, with the remaining 10% being adult implements. Usually, the craziest things we see are the addict we have to call security to stop from shooting up in our walkway. One day, the weekend of a local fetish convention, a customer comes in to pick up an order they placed online for some hot shoes. This customer happened to be dressed in head-to-toe, full Dom-style latex, and brought her latex space with her to help her try on her new boots. Story 42. My ex-coworker raging over something small in front of customers and making a huge scene that surprisingly didn't result in his termination. So just a little background here. My coworker, D, absolutely disliked a female coworker, H, because in his words, she was a boy-obsessed liar. I later come to find out that the reason why they disliked each other so much was because of a she said, he said situation. H claims that D was her boyfriend at one point and then ditched her for another girl. D claimed that he never dated AH at all whatsoever, that they were flirty at one point, but things didn't work out and he started flirting with someone else. What happened at work is that it's quiet in the store. And while taking care of a customer, one of our coworkers, A, who loved to joke around with people, references this argument about H being D's ex. Without any warning, D gets red in the face, screams, "She was never my girlfriend, I never wanted her," and then begins shouting profanities in front of about 10 customers. The entire store goes quiet. He's still fuming, and he storms off, still swearing, going into the break room and slamming the door. It's the most dramatic thing I've ever seen at work to this day. Story 43. When I was working on Germany's Next Top Model about 10 years ago, we were doing a photo shoot on the beach in Venice, TA. For those of you that don't know, Venice is an incredibly filthy beach. So I was tasked with raking up all of the driftwood and trash. About 5 minutes in, I raked up a little jar. I bent down and picked it up and saw there was a label with a bunch of Russian writing on it. My boss walked up to me and asked, "What do you got there?" I held up to the sunlight to get a better look into the dark glass jar. And that was when I saw the unmistakable outline of a finger. Pretty crazy thing to find on a public beach, I suppose. Story 44. Not my experience, but my best friend did give me permission to share. We're both realtors. Her first client ever, a buyer, wanted to see a home. She gets there early to open blinds and turn on the lights. Everything is fine until she gets closer to the kitchen and notices the floor is soaking wet. Once into the kitchen, now tile floors instead of carpet, she sees the entire floor covered in water and the sink overflowing. She goes to turn it off, but has to walk around a large central island that is covered in beer bottles and handles of Tito's to get to it. On the other side of the island, she nearly steps on the owner, who is dead, on the floor in front of the sink. The sink was on, flooding everything, and he had his hands in a prayer position on his chest. His body was covered in $1 bills. She's one tough Karen, and just calmly calls 911, gives her statement, and has to go through that whole process. Last she heard, the investigation went nowhere, really. She was never called to testify and was not given any information on the active investigation, which I guess may be standard. But yeah, her first showing for her first clients, and she finds a dead man. Wild. Story 45. I showed up for work one morning and found someone's car in my parking spot. We only had 3 spots. I went into the shop next door to see if maybe one of their customers had parked there. The owner of the shop said no, but the car was there when he came to work an hour before I did. I walk over to the car and the windows were all steamed up. Aha, I thought, thinking somebody got drunk and had a little too much fun and they fell asleep. I go over to the driver's side and try to look in, but I couldn't. Something seemed to be off. Then I saw it. A hose running from the exhaust pipe into the car. The doors were locked. I call the police and they show up in about a minute. The station was only a block away. They break the window and inside was the past guy as red as a lobster, clutching a Bible and some rosary beads. Story 46. I work for a cleaning company. We regularly get hired by care facilities, so I often see nudity since many of their clients have the mental capacity of a toddler. But this story takes place in one of the supermarkets that hired us. The store manager was an ass, always looking down on us, trying to dominate female workers, and even getting aggressive sometimes. One day, as I was cleaning the toilets, he sees me standing by the door, greets me in a grumpy way, and proceeds to use the toilet without even closing the door. After that, he continues to walk out without even washing his hands, which is gross in itself. But as company rules state that all employees, including store managers, must wash hands, I was shocked that he just walked out with a smirk. A few weeks later, I heard a similar story from one of the girls that work there. It made her feel scared to come to work. Needless to say, I felt very uncomfortable and was relieved when they stopped hiring him. I also made sure to clean anything I bought there while he was working there. Haven't seen him in a year now, so I hope his ass was fired for harassment or intimidation of employees. Because my words were ignored, as I was only a dumb cleaner. Story 47. I work in a factory and had a woman as my direct co-worker on the line. Our line stacks metal sheets and has 2 conveyors with belts that move the sheets. She had a bad jam up and stopped the line to clear it, but the momentum of the belts made them have to wind down once the line stopped. We had spoken to management about putting a brake on them to make them stop properly, but were ignored. So I was doing my thing while she cleared the line. Then she started yelling and calling for me, and I ran up to her. Her glove was caught by a belt and pulled her hand through the gap between belt conveyors. She yanked it back out somehow, but the gap was so small, maybe half an inch. But she ripped her glove off. If you took a baseball and placed it even in the middle of your hand, that's what it looked like, swell-wise. She was in shock, obviously, and asked if I could get her a Band-Aid. Story 48. Used to work in a bar, and we were showing the quarterfinals of the World Cup in the summer of 2018, where it was England who beat Sweden 2-1, I believe. England had just scored the winning goal, and in celebration, some crazy wasted football fan turned to his right and smashed a pint glass onto the head of an innocent old man, Must have been in his late 70s or his early 80s. Luckily, the old man was fine after a trip to the hospital, just shaken, and he even became a regular in the bar. To my knowledge, he still comes in every now and again for a drink. Story 49. Coworker by the name of Paul had just bought a new Corvette and brought it by work to show everyone. A random customer was checking out the car with the rest of us and asked my coworker if he can sit in the driver's seat. Paul declines the customer's request. All of my coworkers are chatting it up, and we make our way inside work when we hear the roar of a Corvette engine bouncing off the red line. A look of absolute dread appears on Paul's face as he reaches into his pockets and realizes he doesn't have his keys. We all run outside to witness his new car zooming through the parking lot and smashing right into the side of a building. Out of the car stumbles the random customer. Paul explodes on this guy. The customer is begging him not to call the police, but one of my other coworkers already had. Dude got charged with GTA. Paul was so pissed about the whole thing that he ended up trading the vet in for a Trailblazer like a month later. Story 50. I have 2 stories. I was a recruiter at a temp agency. We did an initial interview via phone call. Then, if they pass, we set up a video interview, which would be sent to the hiring manager to determine if they are a good fit for the job. So, interviewee number 1, he passed the phone interview and we set up the video interview in the afternoon. He pops on and he is sitting there drinking a Coors Tallboy on a recorded video. Ended the interview in 2 minutes. Interviewee number 2, it was Christmas Eve and my final video interview of the day. It took a week for her to get back to me, but things come up and I scheduled the interview. She was sitting upright in what I thought was a vet's office or her office of some sort. She moved the camera slightly for a second and I saw medical equipment. I kept composure until the end of the interview and stopped the recording and asked, "Are you in a hospital right now?" She smiled and said, "Oh yeah, I just gave birth to my 3rd son. I'm fine." She got the job in the end, and from what I hear, she's still working there. Story 51. I worked at a Starbucks and a Target a few years ago, and there were 3 people involved. So there's this older Middle Eastern couple and an older lady. The Middle Eastern couple came in first, and the lady wanted her hot coffee in a plastic cup because she was allergic to whatever material we used for hot drinks, and we kept having to tell her that because it's a drink, we'd have to put it in double so it won't duck up. She gives us attitude, but she does give in, and both her and the husband sit down. So here comes this white lady with her cart. She accidentally ran over the other lady's foot, and she apologized profusely. This Middle Eastern lady ain't having it though, and she starts calling the lady trash and a Karen. She's literally yelling for 10 minutes at least. Right when the Middle Eastern couple left, the Middle Eastern lady grabs the cart and slams it into a wall and leaves. Story 52. I got robbed my 2nd night working at a convenience store, so probably that. If not, it would be when all of us working close at BK got drunk on 40s, and this dude fell through like 10 stacks of bread trays. Story 53. So I work at a bargain department store. They have really good prices, although a good chunk of the items were cheap knockoffs. Most customers are pretty chill, although we did sometimes get some interesting people. Thankfully, I haven't had to deal with too many of them, but there's one story that takes the cake. It was a more or less uneventful day. It wasn't very busy and I was in the middle of my break. Suddenly, I heard some commotion from the lawn and garden section and decided to investigate. Turns out some git decided to light the fake flowers on fire. And one of my managers, more on her later, was grabbing the burning plastic flowers and chucking them in a bucket, then bringing the bucket outside while someone else was getting the fire extinguisher. At that point, there wasn't much I could do to help other than get some burn cream for her. Anyway, this manager was typically kind of an a-hole, to be frank, but to give credit where it's due, when it counts, she gets crap done. She was at the right place at the right time, and if it wasn't for her, it could have ended up a lot worse. Story 54. After a year of working together, my nice and overly polite, quiet coworker went into his boss' office and started huffing from an aerosol can. My coworker found him on the floor and called an ambulance, but he refused to go. He later did it multiple more times during work hours before he got let go. Story 55. I didn't personally see it, but I saw a picture from that day and I heard the story. My dad runs a law firm, and one day if Simpson went into his office to mess with people, he ran down the hallway screaming, "I need a lawyer." My dad still has a picture from that day. He also had a cougar come in and he has a picture from that. Story 56. I used to work in retail. One night after we locked up the front doors and began doing our closing stuff, a customer decided he wanted to come in to return something. The lights were dimmed, the "We are closed" sign was put up, and the doors were locked. We figured he would just leave after realizing we were closed. He kept tugging the door, trying to force his way in. I should mention that the doors were made of glass. And yep, he shattered the door and a chunk of glass fell right onto his head. I rushed over to help him up and my coworker called 911. He was bleeding profusely and it looked like his ear was partially severed. Instead of letting me tend to him, he insisted I go process the refund for a prepaid cell phone he bought earlier in the day. When I told him I couldn't do that right now because I was literally trying to his life by applying pressure to his wound and bracing his head. He flipped out at me and threatened to sue. Story 57. I did counter work at my family's pizzeria for a while. One time a lady came in, obviously intoxicated, to pick up her pizza. We knew who she was. She was a lawyer and pretty wealthy, but went downhill and became an alcoholic. Anyways, she pays for her pizza and holds it like a shy kid in middle school would hold their books in the hallways, and walks face first into a pull door, making the entire explode upwards and downwards all over herself and the door. She gets up, grabs whatever remains she could, shoved it back into the box, and walked out. I haven't seen her since. What is the most ducked up thing that your job required you to do? Story 1. I worked at Abercrombie and jeans over size 6 were purposely placed on ceiling-high shelves, so that if someone wanted it, they would have to ask an associate to get it for them. Because I worked as an in-store model, I wasn't allowed to leave the front, but I would page another store worker to come help the client. At that point, my associate would come ask me what was going on. I would explain the client needed a size 10 or whatever, and then my associate would go to the back room and lug out a huge ladder to reach the ceiling shelf for the size 10 jeans. Needless to say, this was humiliating to girls. And so most girls would try on the pants, and if they didn't fit, they wouldn't ask for another pair. I think Abercrombie did this on purpose, so no one over a size 6 could wear their pants without enduring embarrassment in the store. Story 2. Hose out a pool full of crap. Quite literally. The pool holds approx. 1 million liters, but it got drained for over winter, as it's an outdoor public pool and there were other pools indoor. So one day the pool got drained of the water, but someone forgot to shut the drainage pipe back off after it was done. About a week later, the local council decides to backflush the sewer lines. And what do you know? There's now a crap bath in the pool, about 200,000 liters worth. No one was actually witness to the crap bath as it happened overnight, and by the next day it had drained back away. But this created a new problem. This next day happened to be a hot, sunny day, which baked the crap residue onto the bottom and sides of the pool, as well as a 10,000-liter festering pond of crap still at the bottom of the pool. Now that morning, you could smell a slight hint of ass in the air inside the building. But it was not until you went outside that you really got the full poo-bat in the face and saw the monstrosity that lay in the pool. It looked like 1,000 Godzillas got hammered the night before and thought it would be a good idea to get a Vindaloo curry, only to have the combination explode out their asses into the pool the next morning. Being the lucky person I am, I got to stand above the crap sauna for the rest of the day and hose it all back through the 4-inch pipe back to where it came from. Story 3. For my first case as a lawyer, I had to photograph and measure a man's junk. We argued in an indecent exposure case that the man's junk was too small to be seen by the victim using trig. We won the case. Story 4. I'm sure anyone who has worked in hospitality at some point would also have some ducked-up experiences to share. One of my first jobs was cleaning rooms at a small-town hotel. This happened almost 5 years ago. The owners of the hotel also owned a small house, which got rented to contractors working in town, and we had to go and clean it too. The house was 3 bedrooms with a hide-a-bed in the living room. At this particular time, 4 guys were staying in it that were in town for a few days. They kept the place clean and nothing was out of the ordinary until they checked out. Myself and a coworker were assigned to go and clean the house. When we entered, I went to clean the 2 bedrooms and bathroom on the one side of the house, and my coworker went to clean the kitchen, living room, and 3rd bedroom. I finished the bathroom and 1 bedroom and moved on to the next bedroom. What I found will forever haunt my soul. Blood and crap everywhere. Blankets, sheets, and pillows strewn everywhere. Mattress spots and handprints on the walls, dresser, nightstand, even the window and door. I yelled in surprise at the stench. My coworker ran over to see what happened, and we both went to get our supervisor. After phoning down to the office to briefly talk to our boss, who said she would explain everything later if we'd just get the strip done now, we called the complete clean of a room after the people checked out a strip. Supervisor helped me bag up the bloody laundry and load it into our work truck with the ruined mattress to be taken to the garbage dump. While outside loading the truck with the supervisor, the other girl stayed inside to finish cleaning the kitchen. She screamed from inside and ran out of the door yelling, "There's crap on it!" "Crap on what?" our supervisor replied. "On the ducking frying pan handle." She then took off running across the lawn and down the street crying, exactly like Peter Griffin after the prostate exam, to tell our boss at the hotel of the events that unfolded. My supervisor and I re-entered and disposed of the now infamous crafty frying pan, which turns out was under the bed in the destroyed room. The remaining two of us finished disinfecting the house, and many "what the ducks" were uttered between us as we moved around the room in what can only be described as a shell-shocked state. After we finished, we went down to the office back at the hotel for a meeting. Turns out our boss, who was a real Karen who put on an overly cheerful facade, decided not to inform us of the state of the house before we were sent up to clean it. Story 5. This may get lost, but here's mine. Was looking for a summer job last year, college student here, and saw an ad for a community fundraiser working for a nonprofit. It was a charity doing aid work for children in developing countries. Looked great, like a good cause, and they advertised very good pay for someone my age, somewhere around $500 in a week. I was also studying international affairs, and this seemed like a perfect opportunity. Well, it turns out this job wasn't actually going to work for the nonprofit, but for a company that they contract out to sell subscriptions for them. Pretty much as soon as I stepped in for training, I got a sick feeling about the whole thing. Myself and about 5 other new hires, other gullible college students, were instructed to stand outdoors downtown for 8 hours a day and literally harass people into signing up for $30 a month. Not only did the supervisors at this place have no actual knowledge of any developing world issues, or even what this money would be used for, but the selling tactics they enforced were extremely unethical. For example, guilting people into subscriptions by making them feel bad about living in America, literally chasing people down the street and or blocking their way on the sidewalk, making up false information about the number of children dying every day, etc. We were told to specifically target the elderly. They can't run away. The supervisors constantly reminded us that everybody you see has enough money, they're just greedy Koreans. Actually said this. The list goes on, but my lesson was this. Nonprofits do great work, but do not donate money through the blatantly extortive kids you see outside with their clipboard. Any good nonprofit will have a website and phone number you can use to donate. And yes, I quit the first day along with 3 other people. That might explain why the longest running employee I might while there had only worked there for 3 months. Story 6. We had a leak in our welding gas storage tank at the factory. This is not a wheel-around tank for one guy. This is a 4,000-gallon pressurized mofo, one of 2 in the tank farm. Our sniffer told us that we had gas leaking. We could hear it coming around a gauge stem, but I could not get a clear reading on how much of the stuff there was. So I had to evacuate the plant, get people out of an adjacent building, notify the fire department, and call the tank company once everyone got to safety. And by everyone, I mean not me, because I had to go out to the potentially explosive tank and monitor the guy doing the repair for the next hour. Story 7. I was in the Air Force, and I got volunteered for the base's anti-drunk driving program. Call the number from anywhere on base, and I'd drive over, pick you up, and drive you home. On this particular night, I was driving a car that had been lent to us by the base commander, as the program's marked car was in for repairs. So, around 1 a.m. on a Saturday morning, a call comes in for a gal who says she's alone. To prevent any he said, she said situations, I'm assigned a wingman to ride shotgun. We get to the location and it turns out that this gal isn't alone. Her boyfriend is coming along for the ride. But I'm glad they're not driving home. Before they even get in the car, it smells like a tequila distillery. I'd wager that the lady and her beau have put back a bottle of Cuervo apiece. The smell is so strong that I have to roll down my window. Anyway, we start driving back to the other side of base, which requires us to cross a local highway, out one gate, in through another. We're about 300 yards from the gate when suddenly the boyfriend starts yelling, "Dude, you need to stop!" Chickie is yawning in Technicolor all over the back seat, of the ducking colonel's car, no less. I pull over and she tries to open the door. Unfortunately, she's drunk off her ass, and the door handle is now slick with vomit. So that doesn't work. She just vomits even more in the back seat. Finally, she stops puking for a moment, looks at me and says, "I'm feeling better." Then, as if in slow motion, I watch as she proceeds to vomit down my wingman's back. Shock and horror spread across his face as he realized that he's getting a Campbell's thick and chunky shower. Did I mention that the car now reeks of tequila, stomach juice, and something that smells like shrimp jambalaya? Yeah, the rest of the windows got rolled down pretty quickly. Anyway, her boyfriend finally gets the girl's door open, and she finishes emptying her stomach onto the pavement. Finally done, she starts moaning about how horrible she feels about the whole situation and says she's going to clean it all up, even though she can barely see straight. I'm just trying to get the whole situation over as soon as I can. I book it for the other side of the base so I can just drop the couple off quickly. Their destination is not far from my wingman's house, so I'm thinking I can drop him off on the way, let him get cleaned up. Then, as we're crossing the highway to enter the gate on the other side, we get the signal from the guards to pull off into the parking lot. Duck, random check. So a young security forces airman comes up to the car. First words out of his mouth are, "Sir, have you been drinking tonight?" Me. "Nope, I'm with Airmen Against Drunk Driving." Cop. "Sir, I'm smelling a lot of alcohol. You sure about that?" Me. "No, I'm not drunk. We have a girl, who had a little too much to drink and, oh, crap." As I was trying to explain the situation, I pointed to the girl in the back, and I realized just how ducked I am. Turns out, in her inebriated state, she was still trying to clean up the vomit with the only piece of cloth she had, her shirt. She wasn't wearing a bra. Meanwhile, her boyfriend is just giggling like an idiot, enjoying the view. So the cop takes a closer look at the car, and he's treated to a guy covered in vomit, a half-naked chick also covered in vomit, a guy who is so drunk that he can't sit up straight, the stench of tequila and puke. Cop. "Sir, please step out of the vehicle." I wound up being arrested for conduct unbecoming a member of the armed forces and suspicion of grand theft auto. I'm not the colonel. What was I doing with his car? Because I wasn't driving the marked Airmen Against Drunk Driving car, I had a hell of a time convincing the cops to even call the program to verify me. The colonel wasn't answering his phone either. The cops wound up driving the car back to the colonel's house, and they gave everybody else a ride home. After about an hour of waiting, they finally called the dispatch number who verified that I was, in fact, part of the program, and that the colonel had lent his car to the program for the night. The cops let me out, then drove me over to the colonel's house. When we arrived, the cops pulled a bucket, a scrub brush, and some Lysol from the back of the patrol car. The colonel wouldn't be happy, they told me, to find vomit in his car. So I needed to clean it up, make it look like new. Took me until 4 a.m. before the smell was gone. And then I had to explain the arrest, even though I was never charged with anything, to my first sergeant on Monday morning. Story 8. As a psychiatric aide in a mental hospital, I had to change diapers of geriatric patients. On my second day, I was changing the diaper of one particularly spry woman. She was standing for the diaper change, and as I made a half-hearted towel wipe through her crotch, she pressed her crotch against my one and told me to rub harder. Story 9. Once at a summer job in Germany, one of the workers got drunk and really pissed because he was being laid off. He took one of the company cars and, wanting to get more booze, crashed it about 100 meters further through a fence of some folks' house living in the area. The police took him in. They took the car also. This all happened during the night. We were all asleep, so we didn't know. Next morning, we found out that the company car we used to get to the factory with was missing. So was the drunk, angry worker. The other guys just took one of their own cars and drove everyone to work. I stayed at the boarding house because of high fever. I was playing StarCraft when I got the phone call from the headman that the missing worker is in jail and that the police need a translator to write the police report. So either the company provides one or they will wait for an official one. Since me and my brother, who was with me there, were the only ones who spoke German and my bro had to work, I have been chosen to go to the police and help them with the report. At this moment, it would be better to mention that we were all illegal workers. The illegal boarding house was officially an office block. The factory we worked in didn't officially exist, so the headman drove me to the police station where the worker has been held. And during the trip there, he told me an elaborate lie that I was to tell the police, so we wouldn't be deported from the country and the company would stay clean. At the police station, the worker, still drunk in the morning, told me he didn't remember crap, that he just woke up with handcuffs at a police station. He told me that he will not sign anything, that he is going to sell out the company, etc. I was sick, sweating like a pig due to the high fever, scared, crapless, what would happen. I managed to calm him down a bit, promised him that the company would give him some cash if he didn't do anything stupid. The officer was writing down the lies I told him, that the worker arrived there just the day before, that I with my bro live in the hotel the company owns, and similar bullcrap. The worker sometimes lost his temper and started to yell, but I managed to calm him down. I could see that the officer didn't believe me. He called his colleagues to check the info I gave him several times and gave me looks that would freeze the fabric of the universe itself. When the officer finished writing the report, he told me to tell the worker that he will not go to jail because the company didn't take legal action against him, but that he has to leave the country immediately. I could see that the officer still didn't believe a single word I told him, but I was so ducking relieved, I didn't care. Moreover, I asked him if I could have a copy of the report as a souvenir. He told me that normally they are not allowed to do it, but since I look like a nice guy, he will make an exception. Fast forward several years until today. The worker left Germany. We met a couple of times back home. He now sits in jail for involuntary manslaughter. Me and my bro worked there for a month after the incident and went home. I got paid around 20 euros for not selling the company out. I framed my copy of the police report in, and it still hangs over my bed as a reminder. Best souvenir ever, story 10. When I worked as a kitchen salesman, I was often sent to houses that I knew I would never get a sale. Old ladies, divorcees, and even rented houses who wouldn't have been able to get a new kitchen anyway. I was often very annoyed when I got these. The way it worked was that the company would put features in magazines offering a free custom kitchen as a prize. People would enter the competition and the company would cold call everyone who entered, telling them they didn't win, but there was still a chance they could be entered into a prize draw if they had a free kitchen designed. Then, if they agreed, I would be called round to design the kitchen and try to sell it to them. Often people would not want to buy a kitchen, especially if they only agreed to you coming round because they thought they were getting a freebie. So as I said, I had been to many different houses, often old ladies who haven't seen another person in weeks and the like. Although the worst one was to a house with a single sad-looking woman and 4 kids running around. The house was nice and well kept, but there was something wrong with the atmosphere. The woman was very down and unresponsive. She was unable to get excited about our wide range of wooden doors I had to show her. So I said to the woman that if it was okay with her, I would design her a kitchen according to my judgment, and she can let me know what she thinks when it is done. She agreed. After an hour, I had designed a very nice kitchen, utilizing all the space she had and such. She liked the design and asked about the process of being entered into the prize draw. This was when I told her that, in actual fact, she had to buy the kitchen first and then get entered into the draw to win her money back. It's sneaky and I hated it, but if I didn't at least design a kitchen first, I wouldn't get a penny, so it wasn't in my best interest to tell them this when I arrived and then get kicked out. After I told her this, she burst into tears and told me that her husband had died only 3 or 4 days beforehand in a motorcycling accident. I took her into her living room and saw all the bereavement cards. She told me that she had agreed to letting me come out because her friend had told her that it would make a good distraction, and if she did win a free kitchen, it would help her to sell the house, which she wanted to do to be closer to her family. This was all fair enough. As usual, I was angry with the cold calling practice we employed and annoyed at the time, wasted, but obviously not at the woman. It wasn't her fault in the least. I had designed the kitchen though, so I knew I'd get something. Before I could leave a house without a sale, I always had to ring my manager to prove to him that I did all I could to get a sale. I packed up all my gear and went outside to call him. When he answered the phone, I told him what the situation was and said that she would clearly not have enough money to buy the kitchen and wasn't even in the right frame of mind to make such large decisions. He expressed his sadness at the situation and asked me to pass her the phone. So I went back in and asked her if she wouldn't mind talking to my manager. I expected him to apologize to her for the disturbance and offer his sympathies. Instead, after 5 minutes, she was in floods of tears and handed the phone back to me. She left the room without a goodbye, and I saw myself out. I asked my manager what he had said, and he told me he had tried to sell her the kitchen. He didn't say how, but I knew he had some very hard selling techniques, and it was enough to send her fleeing in tears. I quit the next day. Story 11. Back in 2007, I worked for a very large mortgage lender in a division that almost exclusively handled subprime loans. I was a loan officer in a very large national call center. Basically, people who called our company's 1-800 number or who were existing customers struggling with their loans were transferred to me to discuss their options. I was hired in the beginning of the year and things were going well. Business was great and everyone was happy. Then in the fall, things started to seem gloomier. Our company's name was showing up more and more in the news attached to really bad press. Management kept telling us there was nothing to worry about and to tell our customers how strong we were as a company. Then one day, most of the regional managers in our division abruptly quit. By the end of the day, basically all of the management above me had quit as well. There were a few days where we literally had no clear management at all in our branch. The phone calls slowed to a trickle. I swear there were some days where we didn't get a single call transferred into our building. If we did, it was from furious customers whose loan officer and their managers had already quit, so their loan application was in limbo and nobody had any way to tell them a status until the loan was reassigned. The phone calls we did get were worse and worse by the day. People already in foreclosure were being promised by some call center operator that I would save their house. I couldn't. Nobody could. It was depressing as hell. Eventually, they took the few remaining loan officers from my subprime division who were left and transferred us to a division that almost exclusively handled prime loans for people with perfect credit. They did not retrain us at all. Over there, it was a much more cutthroat atmosphere. If you didn't convert leads to applications, you were on a crap list. I was almost immediately on that crap list. I denied people left and right. I wasn't even trying to take applications on most of the leads. But I was proud of that fact. You know why? To actually complete an application, a customer had to pay a non-refundable $400 appraisal fee. I was very opposed to taking this money from a customer if I thought their refinance would be denied, which was becoming more and more common as appraisal values were coming in drastically lower than they had months before. So I would just tell people I couldn't help them. This was thoroughly pissing off my new management. I remember it was around Christmas time, and I had been talking to a woman on the phone. I knew she was a single mother from our conversation, and I could hear her young child crying in the background. I knew she was broke as hell and struggling to make ends meet. And I knew that if I tried to submit a refinance application for her, that it would be denied. But my manager still wanted me to get her to commit with that $400 non-refundable down payment. They just wanted their application numbers to look better, so they would take whatever garbage applications loan officers would give them. I refused to do business that way. There was no way I was going to take $400 from a struggling parent a week before Christmas. That's like taking that child's Christmas away. The final straw was when 2 days before Christmas, I was told that since I wasn't converting the leads that I was being taken off of the phone queue. They wanted me to go through all the leads that I had taken over the past few weeks and call the customers back to see if I could try again to convert them. On Christmas Eve, they wanted me to call people on Christmas Eve to talk about mortgage options. I left that evening and never went back. Felt good. And for what it's worth, even I did loans for a subprime lender. I truthfully never screwed over a single customer. Story 12. 6 years ago, before Netflix streaming, before Hulu, I was a software developer for a company that wrote video-on-demand software used by major cable companies. Some background. A streaming video uses a specific amount of bandwidth. So with a given piece of hardware, you can stream a specific number of videos to different subscribers. Anyone who tries to watch a movie after that will get a "Your system is busy. Please try again later" message. There's a specific bit of code that takes your request. I'd like to watch Braveheart now, and checks the system to make sure there's free bandwidth for you before it starts your movie. I owned the code that made sure there was bandwidth, and I got a new feature request. Allow the cable companies to categorize their films into high and low priority movies and allow them to set different "your system is busy" thresholds for each. That way you can turn away low priority movies when the system is 80% full and save that last 20% for the high priority ones. Now, the financial reality, Braveheart is nearly 3 hours long. You paid $2.99 to watch it. That's $1 per hour. Backdoor Escorts 9 is $1,500. If it were as long as Braveheart, it still grosses $4 per hour. But it doesn't matter how long the movie is, since the average adult film is streamed for 8 minutes and then turned off. If someone new starts a viewing every 8 minutes for 3 hours, that's $337 to use the exact same bandwidth as the one guy watching Braveheart for $2.99. So of course, high priority films was code for adult film. Once that feature got rolled out, every time I got a "your system is busy" message at home, I knew there was bandwidth free, but they were hoping that some dude who hadn't yet discovered the internet was going to want to jack off in the next 90 minutes. So yeah, the most ducked up thing I've had to do was more annoying and distasteful than ducked up. First world problems. Story 13. I worked as a behavioral paraprofessional, fancy term for special education teacher's aide, but since I was hired through a company rather than the school system, I couldn't legally do much like defending myself or restraining violent kids. I was basically a glorified test grader babysitter for a bunch of special needs kids. I primarily worked with kids that had oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, and there was a lot of bull involved. I had second and third graders that were completely illiterate and couldn't spell their own names. It really wasn't their fault. They came from broken homes, parents that were neglectful or abusive, and often came home to an empty house. They acted out to get attention, and they would often get upset for very little reason. One kid dropped his pencil and made a noise, so the others would start doing the same thing right until one kid gets the idea to throw his desk at some kid that started it, and then they are all throwing chairs, desks, and trying to attack each other. There wasn't really much time to learn anything since they were all so emotionally crippled and had no respect for adults. Anything could set them off. Anyway, I dealt with that and got hit desks thrown at me for no benefits, and my coworkers, teachers, would often belittle me in front of the kids, which would cause them to lose respect for me as an adult with authority, which made the problem worse. One threw a chair at me and hit me square in the stomach, nearly missing a pregnant teacher, and another time a 9-year-old boy got physically violent and started punching, biting, kicking me. We had no other means to deal with these kids than to call the guidance office and do the paperwork in a rush to get them shipped off on a bus to a special school, almost like a juvenile detention center, for the rest of the day. After that, I stayed the rest of the year and quit when the summer started. The kids actually really loved me, and I got a lot of respect in my neighborhood for dealing with it. But since I didn't have any health insurance and I was at the age where starting a family was on my mind, I didn't want to make a career of it knowing that I could get seriously injured so easily. The most ducked up thing my job required me to do, the guidance office therapist locked me in a room with a very angry 9-year-old who was throwing chairs, desks, and trying to attack me. She needed somebody to watch him, knowing I wasn't allowed to physically stop him, while she did the paperwork to send him away to the special school for the rest of the day. Our walkie-talkies didn't work, so I couldn't radio for help when he ran around the room trying to look for weapons. Eventually, she came out and saw what he was doing, tackled the kid, and just sat on him until help arrived. Story 14. I used to teach the dropout prevention students, most of whom were in gangs. One day, there was a rumor that a rival gang member, also a student at my school, was going to hit one of my students. I was required to keep the boy next to me, in my classroom all day long, while the gang unit searched for the weapon. This was because the school chose not to lock down, because then it would have received bad press. Anyway, the boy was scared to death all day, and I was nervous as well. As it turns out, they found the gun after school in the bushes about 100 yards from my classroom. Story 15. I used to sell water and wastewater pumps for a living as a manufacturer's rep. I made damn good money because I'm good at sales and have an engineering background. But, well, there was crap. Literal crap. Anyway, so one time I sell a system per spec. This thing was cookie cutter, so I didn't check the specs very well. The system was a 12-inch deep, 5-inch diameter fiberglass basin that was sunk into the ground. It had 2 pumps in the bottom of it. One is a backup for the other in case of failure, and had a 6-inch sewer line running into it. The check valves that weren't there should have been put in line between each pump and the T, where their respective pipes combined into one pipe that exited the basin. Because there was no T whenever one pump would turn on, it would essentially discharge through the 4-layer ductile iron pipe into the T and, following the path of least resistance, would then go down the other pipe and out the other pump. In other words, it didn't work right. So, since I sold it, I had to fix it. The contractor was kind enough to close a valve for the incoming line about 50 yards upstream. We pump out the crap as low as it would go, about 4 miles left in the bottom, and I have to go down and unbolt 8 large bolts from the bottom flange and then another 8 from the top. So I start on the bottom thinking it was going to be the worst of it. No big deal. I get that done. Then I go to the top to do that. The incoming 6-inch crap pipe was directly at eye level, but the valve was closed, so no crap should have come out. There was another line that fed into that one that we didn't know about. About midway through unbolting the first flange, I hear a noise. It didn't register at first what it was. So I'm standing on a ladder in a fiberglass tank buried in the ground with a 6-pound crap pipe staring me down, when suddenly a stream of crap bigger and nastier than anything you can ever imagine, right in my face. I got covered in literal crap, head to toe. The worst part, I didn't have a change of clothes, and I was 4 hours from home. The force of the crap stream was enough to knock me off my ladder and into the now one-deep pool of raw sewage at the bottom. To this day, when I hear someone say they had a crappy day, I think back at that day and laugh in their faces. Story 16. My story does not at all compare to yours, but my last position was assistant director of it. At some point, the higher-ups get it in their head to fire a bunch of people, and the night before, I was given a list. The next day, I was made to escort people out of the building, giving them 15 minutes to pack up all the things they had collected over several decades of employment. Some of these people I had worked with for quite a while, and in one case, I had also worked with one of their sons for a while. It was awkward, and there was a good deal of crying. The last person I escorted out was an elderly secretary who took the bus to work. Because she had boxes of her stuff, she called for a ride rather than trying to bring the stuff on the bus. I was told to make sure she waited outside in the heat. She was not allowed to wait in the lobby of the building. Did some of these people deserve to get canned because of poor performance? Sure, but they could have been treated a bit more humanly, and seeing as how I was in it and not security, I feel like I should not have been put in that position. Story 17. My office, Real Estate Foreigner Lending Corporation, got a call from one of our clients in an apartment who said she was ready to do her room change and wanted us to come by to check the place. My office sends me saying I should handle the women clients with a woman's touch. So I go over there to find her in the process of being thrown down the apartment staircase by her, I assume, boyfriend. She gets up and starts apologizing, and he moves in to slap her when he sees me and stops. He turns her around and he smiles at me with an immediate change of attitude once she explains to him, I am the landlord. This guy was obviously part of the mafia run out here. And I was spooked out of my mind walking up the stairs. He had a briefcase behind me with a goddamn katana sticking out of it. I called my office and explained what was going on in case I don't show back up, because behind me I can hear the two squabbling in Japanese still. Company regulations state I have to finish checking all compartments of the room before I can leave. In the search, I found they had magic marketed the lamp red, found a bottle full of Huck. My office told me to throw it in the trash bin, and several burn marks all over the floors from cigars. After I got out of there in one piece, my office told me to go clean the place since I obviously should have had the gentleman clean it while he was there. I value my life more than that. Thanks.